Welcome into Outkick the Show. I am your fearless leader, Clay Travis. I hope all of you have a fantastic Friday and you're going to have a stupendous weekend. I'm going to do Lock It In at 4:30 Eastern, 3:30 Central, 2:30 Mountain, 1:30 Pacific. And then I'll be hopping in my car and headed down to Atlanta for the Georgia-LSU SEC title game. I can't wait to watch that one. I think it's going to be a hell of a game. A lot on the line. I'll discuss that game here in a little bit, but we have got a ton to discuss. The Cowboys are a dumpster fire. Conference title game gambling picks. The Pac-12 tonight, Oregon against Utah. What do we think is going to happen there? Utah, if they win versus the Big 12 champ, either Oklahoma or Baylor, who do we like in that battle? The 49ers have suspended a radio announcer for talking about Lamar Jackson's color of his hands and how difficult it can be to see the football. We will talk about that controversy and all of that and more. But we begin with tonight's Pac-12 title game. Oregon going up against Utah. I love Utah in this game. I am on Utah. I am on Utah as a 6.5 point favorite to win. I also like the under. We've got weather-related issues, and there is going to be a lot to get to in this game. Again, it's going to surprise a lot of you. Get your bets in. I feel like every Friday this happens when the Pac-12 title game's going on. People out there suddenly recognize that the game has started and you forgot to get your bets in because you wait till Saturday morning to do it. The Pac-12 title game, boys and girls, is tonight, all right? It is tonight. I like Utah and I like the under, and that will give us a little bit of drama if Utah wins. If they don't win, then there'll be a lot of different angles to chase, and somebody's already saying, I didn't know it was on tonight. Of course you didn't, because it's Friday. It's Friday. And it catches up on people every single year, Utah and the cover. Now, I am about to hop into my car here in about, 2 hours and start the drive down to Atlanta, all right? But before that, you know what I'm telling you guys to do? Tap the veins, boys and girls. The blood bank guarantee this week. This week's blood bank guarantee, I love Georgia +7 against LSU. I think Georgia is going to drag this game down into the muck. I think that they will play LSU a lot like Auburn did. It'll be a tight, low-scoring game. Georgia has not given up more than 20 points to anybody this year. I know they got injuries on the offensive side of the ball, and I know that Georgia offense has been atrocious. But I love Georgia +7 in this game. Guys, trust me on being to the SEC championship game. I've been fortunate like the last 10 or 12 years I've been there in person, okay? Crowd matters. And the crowd is all going to be in favor of Georgia. A lot of LSU people are waiting because they know they're already in the conference into the Final Four of college football. They're not going to be on the road. They're not going to be traveling as much. It's going to be a big Georgia football home audience advantage trying to root their team into the college football playoff. I like Georgia +7, and I like the under in this game. If you are a fan of Baylor, if you are a fan of Utah, if you are a fan of Oklahoma, you need to be aggressively rooting for LSU come 4 o'clock Eastern on Saturday so that your team has a chance to get into the college football playoff. But again, I like Georgia. Tap the veins. Blood bank guarantee on the Bulldogs +7. Okay? So those are the two of the big games. I also like the over in Ohio State, Wisconsin. For everybody else out there who's wondering, I like the over in Ohio State, Wisconsin. The Wisconsin defense has regressed. Their offense has increased. I think we'll see a lot of points in the Big Ten title game. I like FAU and Lane Kiffin, who we're going to get to in a moment about where he might be coaching next, plus the 7.5 or minus the 7.5 when I gave that out. I like Baylor plus the points against Oklahoma in the Big 12 title game. And I like Memphis minus the 9, I believe it is, against Cincinnati in the AAC title game. I believe that is all of my college football picks there. Now, Lane Kiffin, quickly. Lane Kiffin, Ole Miss fans are crazy right now with glee at the idea that they are going to get Lane Kiffin to come down to Oxford and take over. I like the hire. I think Lane Kiffin to Ole Miss makes a lot of sense. I think Lane Kiffin to Arkansas makes a lot of sense. I believe, however, what you are seeing is there ain't a great group of available head coaches. Mike Leach, contract extension. Matt Campbell, contract extension. Kevin Wilson at Indiana, contract extension. Looks like, and raise for all these guys too. James Franklin at Penn State, looks like a raise and a contract extension as well. USC kept Clay Helton because they realized they couldn't get anybody better. I don't know who these guys are that you're going to get at Arkansas and at Missouri that's going to be a lot better. When Missouri fired Barry Odom, I said, you know what? I'm not a big believer in the market for Missouri football right now. I think Barry Odom did a pretty good job. I would have stuck with him. And as a result, I think what you're seeing is there are not a lot of really good options out there, okay? And so I think Arkansas right now is dueling with Ole Miss over Lane Kiffin, and I believe that the play is for Lane Kiffin to go to Ole Miss. I think it's a better job than Arkansas. It's easier to recruit at a high level, and Lane Kiffin knows that recruiting is his calling card. I know Lane Kiffin has connections to Fayetteville, but I believe this is the play that makes the most sense, is Lane Kiffin to Oxford. All right, Joe Biden. I love this video. I'm going to play this video. Maybe we can get this video intersected. Joe Biden has gone viral because he called a questioner a liar for asking about Hunter Biden and Ukraine, and also then challenged him to a push-up contest. I love Joe Biden going vintage Clay Travis here, challenging people to push-up contests. I am happy to challenge Joe Biden, who I believe is 76 years old, to a push-up contest. You guys know that I think Joe Biden is the best option the Democrats have. Yesterday, I told you on the show that I thought he's being underrated because of his support for black voters. As you move outside of Iowa and New Hampshire and actually see any major changes that are going on there, I think the value, beyond a shadow of a doubt right now, if you are gambling on who's going to be the nominee for the Democrats, is Joe Biden. I also think we could have a contested primary at the convention, which would be incredible and riveting television, in the event that nobody really takes control of this race. But I like Biden once it gets to South Carolina. I think he is going to be the favorite. Somebody just said it's always been Biden. No, it hasn't. We've had a lot of different variations on who the favorite was. Kamala Harris was the favorite after the first primary. Then we moved into Elizabeth Warren being the favorite. Mayor Pete has ticked near the close of the start of the favoritism race here. And so as a result, Joe Biden has surged back up, and I am intrigued to see how this is all going to shake out. All right, I got a theory for you. And I understand everybody doesn't buy into my theories, but I do think this is an important and good theory. I actually looked at the numbers when you dive into the overall breakdown of the college football playoff rankings, and you compare them to what happened with the AP poll and the coaches poll, okay? And so this is interesting. If you actually compare the overall rankings of the SEC teams and the Big Ten teams in the college football playoff, there's a clear and readily apparent bias that is in place right now in favor of the Big Ten Conference. And in particular, if you add up all the rankings for Ohio State, Wisconsin, Penn State, and Michigan, they are ranked 8 spots higher in the College Football Playoff Committee rankings than is LSU, Georgia, Alabama, and Auburn, who are ranked 5.5 points lower. Collectively, the SEC is being undervalued by 13.5 ratings points relative to what they are in the AP poll and in the coaches poll. Now, this is a big deal, all right? This is a big deal because the committee on the college football playoff uses their rankings to justify whatever decisions they need to make. And I believe what's going on here is Ohio State is being protected by a couple of members of this committee. They are rigging the overall situation so that Ohio State ends up being the number 1 overall team over LSU and gets an easier path to the title, because they would get to play against Utah, against Oregon, or against Baylor, assuming that LSU beats Georgia. It makes no sense whatsoever. No sense whatsoever for there to be a situation where the SEC is being undervalued in a smaller poll compared to the coaches poll and the AP poll. This is my biggest issue with the College Football Playoff Committee from the start. I have said you just replaced one big poll. I think the AP poll has around 50 voters, and the coaches poll, which I think has around 50 voters, 100 people for something where people have now only a handful of voters, right? 11 or 12, and some of those have to recuse themselves. So I would love to hear and see these polls in the College Football Playoff Committee. The problem is they're not public. So unlike in the AP poll and unlike in the coaches poll, where at the end of the year, every voter has to put out exactly how they voted, you don't have to do it in the College Football Playoff poll. So this is, I think, a big deal going forward. I wrote about it at Outkick. Go to outkick.com, read it all about it. This is a big deal going forward. All right, how about the Dallas Cowboys? The Cowboys are a dumpster fire. I don't believe that you should get an automatic bid to the NFL playoffs because you happen to be in a crappy division. I certainly don't think you should get to host a home playoff game because you happen to win a crappy division. I felt the same way when the Seahawks won the NFC West. I felt the same way when the Carolina Panthers won the NFC South, and both got to host home playoff games even though they had losing records. It's possible the winner of the NFC East is going to be 8-8 or even 7-9. These are crappy teams all around. It's an embarrassment. There's no way that, for instance, the San Francisco 49ers should have to go on the road being 10-2 and play against a 6-7 Dallas Cowboy team. You should reward excellence. Excellent teams should get home field advantage. Excellent fans of excellent teams should get the opportunity to watch their team play at home. But right now, the Dallas Cowboys have to fire Jason Garrett. The favorite to replace Jason Garrett right now, according to odds makers, is Urban Meyer, which is wild, and I would welcome with both open arms because I would love to see what would happen if Urban Meyer took over the Dallas Cowboys. It would be a content goldmine for me going forward. But Lincoln Riley is another guy who's at the top of this list, and Jerry Jones went on radio today, cursed a couple of times, got dropped. Jerry Jones's team is not performing well, and I think this is a big deal. He's sticking with Jason Garrett for the rest of the year, but this is an indictment of the overall coaching staff. He doesn't feel like there's anybody else on the coaching staff who could be an interim coach. And let me just say this. If your CEO is so much better than the people that surround him that you don't feel like anybody else on the coaching staff is capable of taking the CEO's job, that's a flaw in your overall organizational structure. It means you don't have enough talent, and maybe it explains why the Cowboys have fallen on their face here recently. I'm not sure what Dak Prescott is worth. I think that the contracts that Carson Wentz and Jared Goff signed were so overwhelmingly out of line in terms of their value that Dak now has an unrealistic expectation for what he should get paid. Remember, Dak through 4 years only made $2.7 million. So Dak is wanting to get paid not just for the years going ahead, but for the years he didn't get paid a substantial amount, and that is a challenge overall. Now, people always like to say, so-and-so will pay whatever to keep so-and-so in a job. Yeah, maybe that's true, but people like challenges. And the Dallas Cowboy job is an incredible challenge. So I would think that would have a lot of appeal for Urban Meyer. I would think it would have a lot of appeal for Lincoln Riley. And people say, well, Lincoln Riley's got job security at Oklahoma. The best thing for Lincoln Riley, honestly, from a purely financial perspective, would be to leave Oklahoma and go to the Dallas Cowboys. And if it doesn't work out with the Dallas Cowboys after 3 or 4 years, he'll have a bidding war to come back to college football in a way that he doesn't even have right now. So going to the Cowboys, even if it didn't work for Lincoln Riley, would in no way actually negatively impact his ability to make a living going forward. I think that could make a lot of sense if you just analyze it purely from a business perspective. Finally, in the college football playoff ranks, what do we think about the Big 12 champ versus the Pac-12 champ, assuming it's Utah? Got to wait and see how the games play out. If Utah blows out Oregon tonight, and then suddenly Oklahoma wins a close game against Baylor, or both teams blow them out, I think Utah is going to have the inside track on the college football playoff. I really do. If they don't get in, it's going to be over brand value. Because if you just took away the name Utah off the face of Utah's jersey, and you rewrote USC, or you rewrote Oregon, that would be no doubt to me. Because those are bigger brands, Oregon and USC, than Utah. I think the Pac-12 would get in. And ultimately, you have to take away, I believe, the overall branding. Oklahoma wasn't good against Kansas State. They were not good against Iowa State. They were not good against TCU. They were not good for the first half against Baylor. They have been stumbling their way down the stretch. Meanwhile, Utah has been utterly dominant ever since they lost, essentially, to USC with one of their best players not playing on a Friday night back in September. I believe going forward, Utah is the better team. I think their defense would travel. Oklahoma, I do think you have to factor in a little bit, has gotten 3 opportunities in the playoff. Do you know what they are in the playoffs so far? 0-3, with 2 whippings that they have suffered at the hand of teams that have been in the playoffs. I think we've seen that the Big 12 doesn't acquit itself well in the playoffs. And as a result, I would be in favor of Utah, assuming that we don't get any crazy outcome on Friday and Saturday. So that is my thought there. Finally, this is an interesting story. Did you guys see the story about the 49ers suspending their radio announcer because he commented on how difficult it is to see where the football is because Lamar Jackson's hands are the same color as the football, and people decided that was immediately racist, and they suspended him for a game for having the gall to talk about this in his analysis. I guess he's a radio broadcaster for the 49ers. Richard Sherman came forward and said, you know what, it's an interesting point. It is hard to see the football. And so this, take a step back. My first thought when I saw this story was, wow, is it a competitive advantage to have gloves or sleeves or a jersey that is the same color as the football? In other words, would the Browns or the Ravens, who have a dark colored jersey, if they're running a read option, would they have in some way an advantage in general as you try to think about a read option situation? And I don't know the answer on that. It's a good question. I don't know the answer on it. I'm not an expert. But if it were true, then I would think that every quarterback who is running the read option in any way should wear brown gloves and brown sleeves, right? So I think that's intriguing. And the other thing I thought was, I don't understand how this is remotely racist. Okay, I understand that in this day and age, if you mention race, people run in the opposite directions and they pull their hair out and they lose their minds. But take it outside of football. And I'm not an expert on this. I have no idea if it's a smart or a dumb comment or whether there's any validity to it at all. But I do think there's an interesting question here. If you are a pitcher and you have a white baseball in your hand, could someone make the argument that it's harder to tell where the fingers are on the baseball if you're a batter and you have great eyesight and you can't necessarily see where the fingers are because the ball is white and the player's hand is white? And it might be easier to see if the hand is darker because of the color discoloration between a white baseball and a dark hand, much like you could similarly have a dark football and a white hand. I don't know the answer on this, but I don't understand how it's racist. And by the way, we have complimented and talked about, for instance, how good Peyton Manning is on a play-action fake for a long time. The purpose of a play-action fake is to do what? Make the defender believe that the runner has the ball. And that's why Peyton Manning worked so hard to be so great at looking like he's handing the football off so that when he drops back, the player who is trying to get play action faked, ideally the defensive player doesn't know who has the ball, which allows a fraction of a second of opening to occur for a pass play to happen. I don't understand how it's a criticism to say Lamar Jackson is incredibly good at disguising where the ball is, right? And in fact, I think that's actually an incredible endorsement of his skills as it pertains to holding the ball, pulling it back, the read option, play action fakes, everything else. On offense, your goal is to confuse the defense, okay? So I don't understand why this guy got suspended. I got to give credit to Richard Sherman for basically raising the same question. My first thought is, if it is a competitive advantage and makes it easier to hide the football because of ball control and everything else, everybody should wear brown gloves and everybody should wear brown sleeves. And by the way, everybody should want to play on a team that has a brown jersey because it's all the same as the football. So again, I think we talk very often unintelligently about race in this country. And I think one reason we talk unintelligently about race in this country is we are always looking for an opportunity to believe the worst about someone. Instead of believing the worst about someone, why would you not sit back and say, man, I mean, that's kind of an interesting argument. I'm not sure if I believe it. I'm not sure if it's a smart take. I'm not sure if it's an intelligent take. I'm not sure if there's any basis to it whatsoever. But in the NFL, where everybody is trying to get a little bit of a competitive advantage, if that little bit of a competitive advantage works, I would copy it everywhere. I would take advantage of that opportunity to fool a defense, and I would tell my quarterbacks to wear dark gloves. I would tell my quarterbacks to wear dark sleeves. I would tell them that we want to confuse the defense as much as possible, and if they don't know where the ball is, they're going to have a hard time defending us. So I don't see how this is remotely uncomfortable. I don't see how this is remotely suspension worthy. Everybody in the NFL is perpetually looking for an advantage. And as you break this down, again, take it outside of the world of football. If somebody said there was an advantage because a white hand holds a baseball and you can't see it as well, would that be racist? I don't understand why that would be racist. So breaking all this down is, I think, an example of how we don't talk very intelligently about complicated stories sometimes in this country. And I would also give a praise here for Richard Sherman for the comments that he made about this. I didn't see this story very much, but I saw Richard Sherman's comments, and I thought they were pretty intelligent on this. And as a defensive player, I don't think you care what the race of the quarterback is. I don't think you care about anything other than trying to stop the quarterback, whether he's white, brown, black, green, purple. It doesn't matter what his color is. You're trying to stop him. And anything you can do to make the stoppage more likely, more power to you. As an offense, everything that you are involved in, you should be able to try and stop the defense from stopping you. So any advantage you can possibly find, I think, makes a lot of sense. All right, so that is my analysis of a story that everybody gets all riled up against. You know, what's funny is those of you who watch and listen to this show know that somehow I have made a living being the most reasonable person in the world of sports, and maybe the most reasonable person in general in the world of media. Just by looking at the facts, taking a step back, saying, let's take out all the passion, let's take out all the histrionics, let's just look at this as a purely statement that's being made and see whether or not there's any basis. And again, I think this is just a lot of overreaction to what is relatively an innocuous statement that actually is praising Lamar Jackson for his overall talents across the board. All right. I love all of you. Blood Bank guarantee tonight is Georgia plus the 7. My name is Clay Travis. This has been Outkick the Show. Kisses, boys and girls. I hope you have a great weekend. I'll be down in Atlanta for the Georgia and LSU game. I will see you guys tomorrow, and also at 4:30 Eastern, 3:30 Central, 2:30 Mountain, 1:30 Pacific on Lock It In. See y'all. Love you. Thank you, Facebook.